Well, I'm barely in the frame here thanks to this giant box from Creative and this not quite as giant but still fairly substantial box from Creative. And then I've got a whole slew of numbers on my screen. So let's get to it. Hello everybody and welcome to Tech Uploaded. I am Chris as always, and yeah, there's more creative stuff here. Okay, so backstory. Let's have a little story time, shall we? I feel like I need a robe and a pipe to make this super official, but basically, yeah, this stuff kind of came to be from a conversation that I had with Creative when I was kind of going back and forth with them about some of the other products I've looked at. And they mentioned these E-MU XM7 passive, obviously there's nothing in the box, passive speakers. And I'm like, I mean, yeah, I'd take a look at them, but I don't really have anything to drive them. They were like, you know what, we're gonna send you the X7 DAC and amplifier and the speakers, and we just want you to take a look at them. Cool, I'm all for that. I'm gonna get this out of the frame. It's a little much. So before we get started, I feel like I have to say this, because if I don't, people are gonna get upset. Hey, I can center myself up now. Box really was taking up a lot of space. This is my opinion on how all this stuff sounds, okay? So don't get all upset and all bent out of shape that I'm saying something that you don't agree with, because audio is completely personal. It's a personal experience. Yes, there's tools out there to measure noise and all that other stuff, but I'm not going to that degree. This is all about the actual experience, how it sounds in day-to-day use, in music, in games, as computer desktop speakers. That's how I'm approaching this. So, that being said, I may think something that you don't. I tend to prefer more lows in my music. Other people may not like that. There's a reason I use a subwoofer. I like that punch. I like the richness of that. But I also really appreciate a good crisp high end and a nice mid-range. I like the soundstage to be full. Not everybody's like that. Some people like different things. So that's something to keep in mind. Anyway, moving on. So what this test essentially is I took the A5 Plus speakers and went back to my D1 DAC and I ran those, and then I took the A5 Plus speakers and hooked them up to the XM7, or the X7, sorry, I'm getting too many numbers. Anyway, I hooked them up to this bad boy and did not turn on the SBX processing. So I just left everything clean, straight audio right through the DAC on this bad boy. And honestly, there was no freaking difference between the D1 and this. They both sounded exactly the same. We'll get to the numbers later, but this thing is over twice the price of the D1 DAC. Why? Well, it has more inputs, it has an amplifier built in, and it does have that SBX processing. So if you're really into being able to tweak your audio, do like faux surround sound, add some bass punch, set equalizers that are across the board, do a little bit of in-game stuff, this is going to do that. But I'm not going to get too much into that functionality of this right now. I'm just saying that is there. That is why there's a price difference between just a standard DAC and then this, because this has amplification and it has an additional audio processing. So if you want to know more about that and how I feel about that, check out the review for, I'll also link it below, for the Sound Blaster ZXR. The box is still sitting there on the floor and it's still in my system. There I kind of go into a little bit more detail about the software, how I feel about it, my experience, and who I think that product is really designed for. Spoiler alert, if you're a gamer and you want to wear headphones, that's where that thing really shines. And it also has great hookups on it for an internal sound card. I can hook up my A5 Plus speakers the way I like. So check that review out if you're into that, if you're into the software, if you're into the whole SBX thing, because that's all here in this. This is basically that with amplification and an external solution. So that saves some time there. So let's go ahead and run through the features of these two things real quick before I get into my comparison. And then I'm also going to throw some alternatives your way as far as what other things you could look at as far as your audio solution goes. So first things first, the X7, all right? So looking at the box, you can see the product. It does say audiophile experience for gaming, music, and movies, 24-bit, 192 kilohertz, which is to be expected. That is what I would like to see in pretty much every sound solution these days. It's kind of becoming the standard. So that's cool. The side kind of goes through some of the software details and then the real technical specifications. But it's the back of the box that really kind of tells the story here as far as everything that's included with this. So in order not to bore you half to death, I'm going to run through these very fast, but I will show the box so you can kind of follow along with me. It is NFC enabled, so you can pair stuff like Bluetooth just by kind of getting near it if you have a device that can do that. The HD audio codecs has a lot of those. Dolby Digital decoding for 5.1 if you're going through digital. SBX Pro Studio Technologies. So again, that is the stuff I was talking about from looking at the Sound Blaster ZXR. So check out that review if you want to see a lot more about that. Crystal Voice Technology, next generation Sound Blaster processor. So this does use the AXX1 processing chip, which is the same chip that was found if you look at my review for the E5, for the ZXR, kind of all in the same boat there. Good benefit here is you do have a 600 ohm amplifier for the headphones. And speaking of that, it does mention on here some of the things I should point out as far as the audiophile grade components. It does have fine gold capacitors for rich bass and clear highs. As far as the headphone amplification and things like that go, Burr Brown, ADC and DAC, and then it does have swappable op amps if you want to do that. And then it does have a power amplifier to drive the headphones as well. So that kind of all falls under that 600 ohm headphone amplifier umbrella. Then you have 24-bit, 192 kilohertz, like I said, 127 decibel DAC is in here, 100 watt amplification. So when you're using passive speakers, that's what you've got to work with. So you get 50 watts a channel. It does have a beamforming mic. Now I'm going to tell you right now, I've tried this out and it doesn't sound great. It just doesn't. It sounds like a small microphone built into a plastic device, which is what this is. Honestly, the sound that I get recording off of my iPhone is better. They really tout this thing, and I don't know. I don't get it. Maybe I'm doing something wrong, but the audio that I was getting recording into Adobe Audition with that microphone that's built into this thing was not great. It was okay, but it wasn't great, and it was nowhere near an external audio solution. You know, if you're using something like a shotgun mic on your camera or on a stand, or you're recording into like a cardioid mic or something like that, you're going to get way, way better sound than you're going to get off of that thing. So USB playback and charging. So there is that USB port on here. You can hook up your devices to it. You can control the software and all that good stuff. So it is pretty friendly for hooking up mobile devices, and it will charge them. Scout mode, that's a gaming thing. And then you do have in the software customizable user profiles. So if you set the EQ and some of the settings for surround, and you turn the bass up and you do all this stuff that tweaks it just for you, you can go in there and save that as your profile. So if numerous people are using this computer, my dad uses this computer from time to time. When my parents are over here, he comes in here and games. And then, I'll be working on something with my mom or whatever. He can go in and select his profile. And then when I come back to the computer later that night, I can switch it back to mine. So that's a nice feature. Now, for an external solution, inputs is really where this thing shines, and I would hope so because it's not small by any means. So I'll go ahead and show it now. This is the device. It is very large, so big that it actually wouldn't fit under my monitors where I usually keep my DAC. I had to set it off to the side, and you can kind of see it maybe here somewhat behind me. There it is, off in the corner, kind of tucked away there because that was the only place it would actually fit. So it is a big boy, and compared to the D1 DAC, it is massive. However, the D1 DAC has optical in, USB in, and then analog out. So your only output on this thing is the RCA output. This thing is pretty much, it's the sweet, perfect pairing for the A5 Plus. But that allows it to be real small, but it doesn't do all of what this does. So anyway, let me run through this real quick. Obviously, you've got the knob on the front. It feels okay. It's not fantastic feeling. Honestly, the knob on the D1 DAC feels more solid. I feel like it could be a better experience on that, but it's okay. You have that microphone, which, like I said, isn't fantastic. You have the power button, and that's also the Bluetooth connection indicator as well. You have a Dolby Digital indicator to let you know if that's active. The SBX button and indicator, so you can hit that to turn SBX on and off. You do have a microphone input. You have the 1/4 inch headphone out. You have an 1/8 inch headphone out. This is NFC compatible. It has headphone stand slots. There is a headphone stand included with this that you can put in the back and then hang your headphones on if this thing is sitting somewhere that's not under something. And then you really start getting into you know, the inputs and outputs here on the back. You have a switch on the back to jump between 4 and 8 ohm speakers, which, you know, that pretty much falls within the range of a lot of passive speakers for computers. You do have the right speaker output for hooking up speakers that are passive. Left speaker output, you have your DC in, and then you have the RCA jacks. So you've got the RCA for line out, you've got the RCA for line in, and then you've got the 3.5mm line out, optical, and your USB. Ooh, a lot going on here. Essentially, this thing's kind of a receiver almost in a pyramid form, if you will, designed for the desktop. So that's the X7. Let's move on. All right, so I've already taken these out of the box. They're hooked up to the computer right now, but I did get some video of it. They look fine. They're your usual speaker look. They do have a nice cover on the front of them. They are black wood on the finish, and if you look at the box, it kind of briefly states some of the features of these. It says wooden enclosure. It minimizes acoustic resonance, custom designed 5-inch woofer for tight bass response, and then it does have a 1-inch silk dome tweeter for crisp, clear highs. All right, then as far as specifications go on here, like I said, wooden enclosed. It is a 2-way speaker. Impedance is 6 ohms, so right in the middle of that range. The maximum input power is 60 watts, so the created device can drive 50. Woofer is 5 inches, tweeter is 1 inch. So yeah, not a whole lot to really say about the speakers. They look fine. The connections on them are pretty basic. They are passive, so there's not really a whole lot else to really say about these things. Now, from looking at the speakers compared to the A5 Plus, I can tell you that the woofer on the A5 Plus is larger. It is more substantial, and that is something to keep in mind as I start talking about the differences between these two. Another thing that you'll note, the E-MU speakers do have a port on the back, and that is going to help with the bass reproduction. You don't have that on the A5 Plus. So those are kind of the big differences. They don't weigh as much because there's not as much built in, and they're a little taller but a little thinner. Other than that, they're about the same. Okay, so with all of that said and all of that out of the way, at the end of the day, I'm turning into a Dr. Seuss book here. How do these things sound? How do they perform? How do they stack up against each other? So test number 1 was the baseline that I've been using for a long time, and that was the Audioengine A5 Plus speakers and the D1 DAC. I know what they sound like. I've been using them forever. They sound good. But one thing I did do when I started doing the testing was I disconnected the subwoofer. I wanted to hear these speakers just on their own without anything else playing into the kind of sound stage up until the very end. So with the subwoofer removed, the A5 Plus speakers sounded good. They were true to audio, I believe, but they were very lacking in low-end reproduction. There wasn't a lot of bass really at all. It's just when you get rid of the subwoofer, they kind of fall apart on the low end. And I remember that when I got them, and that's why I immediately went out and got a sub. So mid-range, fantastic, and the highs, really, really crisp and clear. So that's the A5 Plus. Now, I hooked them up to the Creative speakers, or the Creative DAC, the X7. With the SBX audio processing disabled and nothing in there kind of playing a role in how the audio is being reproduced, they sounded identical. The D1 DAC, the Creative DAC, they sounded exactly the same. I could not tell a difference at all between the two. They were just reproducing the audio straight as it should be. Both were clean and clear. Both had very little noise. If you get extremely close to the A5 Plus speakers, even when nothing's playing and when the volume is turned down, you can hear a slight hiss through those speakers. And I think that's just the internal power on those speakers producing the smallest little bit of noise. It's not something you notice unless you're going on a hunt for it. And then when you get like super close to the speaker, you can hear a slight hiss. I apologize for any noise pollution that may be coming in from outside. My neighbor across the street has been working on their house for 2 solid weeks now. If I was waiting for them to be done and for that to be over to do this, I'd never get it done. Okay, so the next thing I did was go ahead and hook up the passive speakers. So keep in mind, the A5 Plus speakers are powered. They have the power built into the speakers, so they can be hooked up without having to have amplification, which is why the D1 DAC works so well with those speakers. That's a really sweet spot setup for those because you don't have to have anything big on your desk. All of the amplification is built into the A5 Plus speakers. There is like a heat sink on the back of the main speaker with the inputs. So everything happens, you know, kind of contained in that setup. Now, with passive speakers, you need something to provide amplification. So that's where the X7 comes into the picture. That does provide that amplification. So that was hooked up via your traditional type of speaker wire to the Creative speakers, the only way that they can hook up. Now, again, SPX processing disabled through all of these tests. When I played those back without the subwoofer, the very first thing I noticed was the bass response was way better than the A5 Plus speakers. Lots of bass right away. I played a couple of different tracks, but one area where it was really noticeable was any kind of like hip hop music. I played a couple of different tracks. I had some Dr. Dre, some Eminem, kind of just went through YouTube. It just went through playlists. Anything that had a lot of bass in it, I kind of threw at these to see how it would handle. And then I went and played some Eagles and things like that, and some of them with low bass notes at the beginning, and they did a really good job. The high reproduction was great. It was actually almost a little over-aggressive. Not too much, but it was getting very close to being over-aggressive on the reproduction for the highs. Mid-range, on the other hand, was not so much there. The mid-range isn't great on the Creative speakers, and I think that's just simply because they're doing so much on the low end that they're missing that midsection because they're only two-way speakers. And when you pair a sub into the equation, that kind of changes everything. So with a subwoofer, the Audioengine A5 Plus speakers are the better overall sound stage because the sub is providing the low, and then the two-way speakers are getting you the mids and the highs. So for like a 2.1 setup, I would definitely say the A5 Plus speakers are the optimal configuration out of everything to choose from here. If you are just going to be running the speakers and no sub, and you like low end, you like bass, then I think that the E-MU speakers from Creative offer more of the whole package, if you will. You get the low end that you're missing on the A5 Plus without having to have a subwoofer. Obviously, it's not as punchy as you get with a sub, but it's still pretty darn good. That's why at the beginning of this I said this really depends on your personal preference. If you're not somebody that's super into bass, you may hear the A5 Plus speakers and think that they are the best thing ever because they're not reproducing the particular part of the sound spectrum that you really care about. If you're really into bass, you're gonna listen to the A5 Plus speakers without a sub and go, these are lacking. These sound kind of dull. I'm not really into these. And then you'll hear the Creative speakers and go, now that's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm looking for. So it really, really depends on what you're into. That being said, I did put the subwoofer paired with the Creative speakers, and they sounded great. But if you're talking about a 2.1 setup, you're talking about speakers with the sub, the A5 Plus are the superior speakers. However, the Creative speakers, they sound fantastic as well. And compared to any like computer speaker setup I've used, you know, the smaller speakers, these just, you know, they knock the pants off of them. There's just no doubt about it. You can't beat the sound that you get out of big speakers. It is what it is. It's the nature of it. Now, there are some very expensive small speakers out there that are mind-bogglingly good, but we're not talking about that price range here. They're both good speakers. They both have their highs and lows. It really just depends on what you're looking for. No pun intended with the high and lows comment there. Now, here's where things get interesting. Talking pricing. Saddle up. Here we go. So the Creative Sound Blaster X7, the DAC, is not cheap. It's $400. So again, that $400 is also getting you, go watch the Sound Blaster ZXR review, all of the functionality of the Sound Blaster ZXR because it does have that Creative chip and the Creative audio processing and the SPX technology in there. So you can do a lot of tweaking and messing around with things with that creative DAC. It's a DAC and it is also an amplifier. So keep that in mind, because to get the Audioengine N22 amp and then get the Audioengine D1 DAC, you're looking at $200 and $170. So, you're looking at $370, $399. You can see where I'm getting at here. Okay, so you got the Creative Sound Blaster X7 and the Creative speakers. Now the speakers are coming in right now on Amazon at $260.39. So as of recording this on the 7th of September, you're looking at a grand total for that setup of $660.36. Now, if you went with the Audioengine D1 DAC and the A5 Plus speakers, the D1 DAC's $169, the A5 Plus are $399, so you're at $568. So you're about $100 less. But keep in mind, if you really like the low-end reproduction, you need to add another $100 to $200 minimum for, a somewhat decent subwoofer. So do keep that in mind. Now, if you go with the Audioengine N22 amp, and you use your onboard sound to power that amp, and then you use the Audioengine P4 passive speakers, you're looking at $200 for the N22 amp, and you're looking at $250 for the speakers. You're looking at $448 total, because we're at $199, $249. So now we're getting down a little bit in price. So if you wanted to drive the creative speakers with that N22 amp and still just use your onboard audio to feed that amp, you're looking at $199 for the amp, $260.39 for the speakers, so $459.39. So if you like the sound of those creative speakers, if you prefer not having a subwoofer and you want more bass reproduction, you can do that for $460-ish versus $660 if you don't care about the extra features built into the X7 DAC and amp combo. Now, of course, you're going to be limited to whatever your onboard sound card is capable of doing, but for just straight audio reproduction without any of the fancy effects, you should be all right. So you can shave $200 off of that if you still want to use passive speakers like the creative speakers. Now, if you're an Audioengine fanboy and you want to just go Audioengine all the way through this whole process, the N22 amp, the D1 DAC, and the P4 passive speakers come in at $617, so less than the creative setup, but again, not the creative processing stuff if you're really into that for gaming and whatnot, and you're probably going to want to pick up a sub as well. So you can kind of go all over the place with the pricing. Here's what I'm getting at. But what I'm also trying to demonstrate here is you have a lot of options. So don't feel like you're pigeonholed into just one setup when you're looking at this kind of thing. And if you want to use your onboard sound and get some passive speakers, you can do that for about $450. So you can get into that, a very nice setup for, not a little bit of money, but not a massive investment either. So even with onboard sound, you have a lot of options here. Personally, I think that the Audioengine A5 Plus speakers with the D1 DAC and a sub are the sweet spot. I have loved that combination. It sounds fantastic. The X7 with the creative speakers and a sub, also good. I just don't think it sounds as good because they're missing that mid-range. And I pick up on that a lot for some reason. That seems to be something that I catch. So my setup that I'm gonna use, all of this considered, I'm gonna throw the wild card in there. The Sound Blaster ZXR that's in this system with my A5 Plus speakers and the sub is going to be what I revert back to as my primary setup. But these creative speakers, they are gonna go on the secondary system because I don't have room for a sub on my secondary computer. And these sound better than anything else I've ever hooked up to that. So they definitely still have a place. So I'm not really sure what this video even falls into. I mean, we're kind of just sitting here chatting about audio is what I'm doing. It's not a review because as long as the products work and they turn on and they do what they're advertised to do, then yeah, there's not really a whole lot to say. It's so personal as far as what you think sounds good and what you think is worth the money. Everybody has different things that are important to them. If you're a huge gamer and you use headphones a lot, then go with something like the E5 that's sitting over here on my shelf. It's not going to be nearly as expensive, and you don't have to worry about investing in speakers. You can just use the headphones and use all the features of the Creative Card. If you like all that stuff and you don't want to have a sub, but you want bass, go with the Creative speakers, go with this DAC, turn on your sound effects, go crazy. If you're more into music and you're like a video editor and you just want to know how things are going to sound, you know, true to life, then I have to really strongly recommend the A5 Plus speakers with the sub and the DAC, the D1 DAC. That's just a solid combo. But everything has its place. Everything works really well, and quite honestly, it's splitting hairs here, getting these details out of all these different audio setups. They all sound freaking awesome. I love how all these things perform. I love how they sound. I'm loving the experience from all of them. It's just great when you're in a situation where you're looking at products and none of them really turn you off in any way. There's nothing about any of these things I've looked at that makes me just recoil and go, ugh, no. And I've been there before with things. So it's a win-win-win. You know, it's just a matter of what is right for you. But I did want to go over those speakers and that DAC a little bit at the beginning, so you kind of had an idea of what they were and what we were talking about here. But at the end of the day, just talking audio. My opinion is different than your opinion, but we are lucky to be at a time in computer audio where if you've got a $600, $700 budget, you can get a hell of a setup. You really can. And for under $1,000, you can get great speakers, a great subwoofer, a great amp, a great DAC. You can just go wild with all kinds of great stuff, and that's a nice place to be. The noise outside just continues to get louder. I'm really not sure what my neighbor is doing. I think he's knocking down his entire inside of his house and just rebuilding it. That's near as I can figure. So that was fun. I really enjoyed messing around with this and kind of playing with things. It was a different experience and something I was glad to do. Thank you to Creative for sending over that stuff to look at and for making this possible to do this little comparison here, because honestly, I've been stuck in that same audio setup for a long time because when I find something I like, I stick with it. So in the comments, leave your setup down below, because I think a lot of people watching this video may be possibly looking for a new computer sound setup, and what I've looked at is only the very, 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 very tip of the iceberg. So throwing more options out there is always good. And of course, if you want to follow me on my social media channels, you can do that. I am on Twitter and Instagram at Tech Uploaded. And Tech Uploaded is also on Facebook, but then again, who's not? But you can find it at facebook.com/techuploaded. So head over there, join the Facebook community. That would be much appreciated. And of course, you can always shoot me an email at techuploaded@gmail.com. Really did get awkwardly dark very quickly there, so I apologize for the weird lighting. But if you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and click on that subscribe button. That would be great. And like I said, share your setups. As a matter of fact, shoot me an email or post in the Facebook group a photo of your desktop setup and what audio solution you're using. I think that'd be a lot of fun. Maybe we'll come back, we'll do a compilation of all of those and kind of take a look at what everybody's using and kind of get a whole audio setup video going here. Why not? So, you know the drill. Don't be a stranger. Check back soon.